Imagine a city bombarded for 24 hours without pause. Jets scream across the sky, artillery thunders from the ground, and missiles strike with relentless force. That was Gaza. Entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, hospitals that should have been places of refuge turned to dust, families buried together beneath collapsed walls. Israel called it precision, but for those who survived, it was devastation. The world has seen Gaza suffer before, yet this time something different followed. Just hours after the bombardment ended, Iran struck back. And what the world witnessed shook one of the strongest militaries in the Middle East. Within minutes, Israel's pride, its fighter jets, the very machines that for decades ruled the skies, began falling. 30 of them gone in one night. For Israel, it was more than the loss of aircraft. It was the loss of an image carefully built for generations, that their air force was untouchable. For the people of Gaza, who had just endured unspeakable loss, the sight of Israeli jets burning in the sky carried a bitter sense of vindication. For much of the Arab world, it was seen as justice. For Israel's allies, it was cause for alarm. And for Americans watching at home, it raised a troubling question. What does it mean when the world's most advanced air defense systems, backed by billions in U.S. aid, can be pierced so easily? History reminds us of moments when power seemed invincible until it wasn't. Pearl Harbor, September 11th. Each time, the illusion of safety was shattered in a single day. Now Israel faces its own reckoning. So what really happened in Gaza and in the skies over Israel? And what does it mean for the balance of power in the Middle East, for America's role, and for the ordinary families caught in between? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the fall of 30 jets changes everything? Leave your reflections in the comments, we'll read them together. For 24 hours, the skies above Gaza were filled with fire. Israeli jets flew in waves, artillery roared without pause, and missiles rained down on one of the most densely populated strips of land on Earth. Israel said it was a campaign of precision aimed at dismantling Hamas. But when the dust settled, what the world saw was not Hamas headquarters, it was an entire city reduced to ashes. Homes were flattened, roads split apart. Hospitals, schools, and mosques, places where civilians sought shelter, were torn to pieces. International reporters called Gaza a modern ghost city, a place where smoke and rubble replaced streets and playgrounds. The numbers are staggering. According to the Gaza Health Ministry and United Nations reports, more than 63,000 Palestinians have been killed since the war began, with nearly 80% of them civilians, women, children, and the elderly. Thousands more are missing, presumed trapped beneath the debris. Entire family lines have been erased in a single night of bombing. But behind every number is a story. In the ruins of one neighborhood, a father clawed at the rubble with his bare hands, refusing to stop until he pulled out his young daughter's lifeless body. Nearby, an elderly grandmother cried into the smoke, having lost her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren all in one strike. Her words captured on a shaky phone video cut through the noise of politics. "I am the last of my family." The last one. This is not the story Israel wanted to tell. The official line was that Hamas uses civilians as shields, hiding in hospitals and apartment blocks. Yet after 24 hours of destruction, Hamas leadership and communications network remained intact. Their fighters were still active, their leaders still issuing orders. Instead, Gaza's civilians bore the full weight of the bombardment. For many Americans watching, the images carried echoes of history. The collapsed buildings and rising dust clouds brought back memories of September 11, 2001. The chaos on the streets, the ambulances overwhelmed the survivors in shock, reminded older generations of World War II footage from London's Blitz. But for Gaza, this isn't one day in history. It's a recurring nightmare. International outrage was swift. United Nations officials described the attack as collective punishment, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling the situation in Gaza a present-day catastrophe. Humanitarian agencies warned of famine, with the World Food Programme's Cindy McCain stating that women and children were starving at alarming rates. Even within Israel's closest ally, the United States, the tide of opinion is shifting. A recent Quinnipiac poll shows that 60% of Americans now oppose further U.S. military aid to Israel, including 3/4 of Democrats. And yet Israel insists it is defending itself, pointing to Hamas' October 7th attack as justification for the scale of force. This framing resonates with some, especially among those who remember how America responded after 9/11. But others see a grim difference. After all, America's strikes in Afghanistan targeted Taliban strongholds. Israel's bombs, by contrast, are flattening apartment complexes and maternity wards. One Israeli general defended the campaign on television, saying, "We are dismantling Hamas piece by piece." But satellite images tell another story, a city in ruins, with Hamas still standing. In the words of one European diplomat, Israel has not dismantled Hamas. It has dismantled Gaza. The strike also raised a troubling question about Israel's intelligence. Despite satellites, drones, and an extensive network of informants, Hamas leadership survived. If the purpose of 24 hours of firepower was to eliminate Hamas, then the mission failed. And if the goal was deterrence, the images of Gaza's devastation may have had the opposite effect, fostering deeper anger and greater sympathy for Hamas across the Arab world. In America, older viewers who remember the Cold War have started to see this war through a different lens. Just as the United States once misjudged in Vietnam, deploying overwhelming force without clear results, Israel now faces a similar dilemma. Military strength without strategy can turn into weakness. As the sun rose over Gaza after the 24-hour storm, little remained but rubble and grief. Israel declared the operation a success, but the world saw failure, a military giant unable to destroy his target, leaving behind only the suffering of civilians. And while Israel counted this as just another day in its long war across the region in Tehran, leaders were preparing something that would shock not just Israel, but the entire world. Their answer would not come in speeches or in statements. It would come in fire, speed, and precision, changing the skies of the Middle East forever. What do you think? Can overwhelming force ever bring true security? Or does it only plant the seeds of more resistance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them with you. When the bombing of Gaza ended, the skies grew eerily quiet. But in Tehran, preparations were already complete. Within hours, Iran launched its answer, a strike unlike anything seen in the region before. These were not the older rockets or drones that Israel had intercepted many times before. These were hypersonic missiles, the Fatah-2 and Qasem Basir, capable of speeds 5 to 15 times the speed of sound. Some carried electro-optical targeting systems, locking onto heat signatures in their final seconds. Others followed unpredictable flight paths designed specifically to slip past missile defenses. Analysts had debated their existence for years, dismissing them as propaganda. But now the world saw them in action. For Israelis, the first warning was the siren. In Tel Aviv, families scrambled to shelters. Mothers clutched children, whispering prayers. For decades, Israelis had lived with the belief that the Iron Dome and the world's most advanced air defense systems would shield them. This time that faith cracked. Radar screens lit up. Alarms sounded in air bases. Pilots scrambled into their cockpits, their jets roaring into the night sky. Among them was Captain Eaton, a veteran F-35 pilot whose wife had told friends just days earlier, "He flies the most advanced plane in the world. He'll always come home." But what happened next defied belief. As the Iranian missiles streaked closer, Israel's air defense systems fired interceptors. Flashes lit the sky. For a moment, it seemed like the old script the dome would hold. Yet within seconds, the first missile tore through. Then another, and another. Communications from pilots filled the airwaves, frantic calls, sudden silence. Radar operators watched in horror as blips, the symbols of their aircraft, began disappearing one after another. Within minutes, 30 Israeli fighter jets valued at billions of dollars and representing decades of military dominance were gone. Fireballs lit up the night sky. Eyewitnesses described it as a storm of falling stars. But these were not stars. They were the pride of Israel's Air Force, F-15s, F-16s, and even some of the stealth F-35s reduced to burning wreckage. In Tehran, news spread quickly. Crowds poured into the streets cheering and waving flags. For them, it was justice for Gaza. In one household, a young man called his mother and said, "For once, they feel what we have felt all these years." Back in Israel, the mood was very different. Families gathered around televisions, desperate for updates. Widows and parents flooded hotlines, asking for news of their loved ones. In one neighborhood, neighbors lit candles in silence as word spread that an entire squadron had been lost. Captain Eaton's wife, who once believed the F-35 was invincible, now sat with her children in stunned silence. The symbolism was undeniable. For decades, Israel had built its reputation on air superiority. The Israeli Air Force was not just a military tool, it was a symbol of deterrence, a message to the world that Israel could strike anywhere, anytime. That aura was shattered in minutes. The loss of 30 jets in one night is not just a tactical defeat, it is a strategic humiliation. Military historians compared it to Pearl Harbor, when America's fleet was devastated in a single morning. Others likened it to the Yom Kippur War, when Israel itself was caught by surprise in 1973. This time, however, the blow came not from tanks crossing borders, but from missiles streaking through the skies faster than defenses could react. Financially, the damage is enormous. Each F-35 costs over $80 million. In total, Israel lost billions of dollars in hardware. But the psychological blow is greater. Soldiers and civilians alike realize that their technological shield is no longer impenetrable. For the first time in decades, Israel's enemies see weakness. And the losses didn't end with the jets. Within hours, Iranian missiles struck a major military factory, destroying 80 more aircraft still in production. The facility, once touted as a symbol of Israel's self-reliance, became a field of twisted metal. In total, more than 100 aircraft, either in service or in assembly, were wiped out in a single night. Analysts around the world were stunned. Defense experts who once mocked Iranian claims of hypersonic capability were forced to reconsider. American news outlets asked the question aloud: if Israel's defenses can be breached, what about ours? European commentators wondered if the era of Western air dominance had come to an end. For the Arab world, the images were celebrated. Social media lit up with videos of the falling jets set to triumphant music. For Palestinians in Gaza, who had just endured 24 hours of destruction, the spectacle of Israeli jets falling brought a rare sense of vindication, however tragic the overall reality of war. But for Israel, it was humiliation. The government tried to control the narrative, insisting that the majority of its air force remained intact. Yet families of pilots knew the truth. The silence of missing loved ones was louder than any press conference. In America, older viewers remembered Pearl Harbor. Younger ones thought of 9/11. Each generation recognized the pattern moments when a nation thought itself untouchable, only to be humbled in an instant. This was Israel's Pearl Harbor in the sky. And the question now is unavoidable: if 30 jets can fall in minutes, what else can fall tomorrow? What do you think? Was this the moment that ended Israel's air supremacy? Or is it just one battle in a much longer war? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm eager to hear your perspective. The morning after Iran's strike, the skies above Israel were quiet, too quiet. For decades, the sound of Israeli jets had defined the region, a reminder to neighbors that Israel could strike at will. Now, with 30 aircraft gone and 80 more destroyed in factories, the silence felt heavy. It was not peace. It was vulnerability. For the Israeli military, the loss was staggering. Analysts estimate that Israel lost the equivalent of 2 full squadrons in a single night. Even with American support rebuilding, such capacity would take years. Each F-35 destroyed represented not just money, $80 million apiece, but decades of training experience and deterrence. The loss of pilots, many of them seasoned veterans, cut deeper than steel. Families waited desperately for answers. In Haifa, Miriam, the wife of a fallen pilot, clutched her husband's flight jacket. She had not received his body, only a call from the base saying his jet did not return. For her children, once proud of their father's role in the invincible Air Force, the silence was unbearable. Across Israel, vigils were held in synagogues and town squares. Candles flickered as families mourned privately while the government tried to project strength. The economic toll was also immense. Billions of dollars in hardware lost overnight meant years of defense budgets wiped away. Insurance companies refused to cover military losses, leaving the government scrambling for emergency funds. Ordinary Israelis, already frustrated with inflation and political turmoil, asked bitterly, "We paid taxes for safety. Where is it now?" For Gaza, the consequences were paradoxical. Just a day earlier, the territory had been reduced to rubble by Israel's most intense bombardment in months. Yet now, international attention shifted. For once, the story was not just about Gaza's suffering, but about Israel's humiliation. Aid groups used the moment to press harder for humanitarian corridors. The United Nations repeated its warnings of famine, urging Israel to allow food and medicine in. For the families still digging through ruins, the shift in headlines was small comfort, but it meant their cries were finally amplified. In Tehran, the atmosphere was triumphant. Crowds celebrated in the streets, chanting slogans of solidarity with Gaza. State television replayed footage of burning jets again and again, branding the strike a new chapter in the balance of power. For many ordinary Iranians who had endured years of sanctions and economic hardship, the victory was symbolic, a reminder that their sacrifices had not been in vain. A young shopkeeper told a reporter, "We are poor, but tonight we are proud." The world sees that Israel can bleed. For Israel's allies, the consequences were unsettling. In Washington, officials scrambled to reassure the public that Israel remained strong. Yet polling told another story: 60% of Americans now oppose further military aid to Israel. For older Americans, the images of fireballs in the sky evoked Pearl Harbor. For younger ones, it felt like 9/11. Either way, the takeaway was clear: even the most advanced defenses can fail. The psychological impact inside Israel may prove the most lasting consequence. For decades, Israeli citizens believed their military could protect them from any threat. That belief was a cornerstone of national identity. But now ordinary families rushed to stockpile supplies, unsure if the next missile barrage would reach deeper into their cities. The sense of invincibility was gone. Fear replaced pride. Meanwhile, Hamas and allied groups in Gaza claimed the strike as a victory, even though Iran had carried it out. In their narrative, it was proof that Israel's enemies could stand united and inflict real damage. Recruiters for militant groups used the footage to inspire new fighters, telling them, "Look, the mighty jets are not so mighty after all." The regional consequences are even broader. Arab states that had recently signed normalization deals with Israel now reconsidered. Could a partner once seen as a shield against Iran actually protect them? Or was Israel itself now a liability? In Cairo and Riyadh, leaders held emergency meetings. In Ankara, Turkish officials spoke of a new balance of power. Yet perhaps the most profound fallout is the moral one. For years, Israel had justified its dominance in the skies as a means of security. But now, with its air force humbled, many in the world are asking if Israel cannot guarantee its own superiority. What right does it have to impose devastation on others in the name of safety? History teaches that moments like this change nations. After Pearl Harbor, America entered World War II with a resolve that reshaped the century. After the Yom Kippur surprise of 1973, Israel rethought its strategies. Today, with 30 jets down, Israel faces its own moment of reckoning. The question is whether it will respond with reflection or with escalation. Will Israel seek peace after humiliation or lash out with greater fury? And if it chooses the latter, how far will Iran go in return? What do you think? Does this defeat open the door to peace, or does it guarantee more war? Leave your answer in the comments. Your perspective matters because history is being written right now. In Washington, the official line was clear: America stands with Israel. Spokespersons repeated it, senators echoed it, and the administration pledged continued support. Yet outside the halls of power, the American people are telling a different story. A recent Quinnipiac poll revealed that 60% of Americans now oppose further U.S. military aid to Israel. Among Democrats, the numbers are even sharper. 3 out of 4 say Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Among independents, skepticism grows by the day. Only among certain Republican circles does support remain steady, but even there, unease is visible. For older Americans, many over 50, this feels familiar. During the Vietnam War, government officials insisted victory was near, even as body bags returned home and public opinion turned sour. Today, Israel speaks of precision operations and successful missions, but the images flooding television show only rubble in Gaza and fireballs in the Israeli sky. John, a 72-year-old Vietnam veteran from Ohio, spoke to a local radio station after watching coverage of the Iranian missile strike. His voice was steady but tired. "Back then, they told us we were winning. We knew we weren't. Now I watch 30 jets fall in minutes, and I think how long before Washington admits what we all see? You can't bomb your way to security." Around the world, the reactions are just as divided. In Europe, diplomats condemn both the humanitarian disaster in Gaza and the reckless escalation between Israel and Iran. Josep Borrell, the EU foreign policy chief, criticized Germany for inaction, calling the EU's silence a moral failure. Several European countries are now considering an arms embargo on Israel, a step once unthinkable. Humanitarian agencies warn that Gaza is on the brink of famine, with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres describing it as a present-day catastrophe. In the Arab world, however, the tone is very different. Crowds in Amman, Beirut, and Baghdad celebrated the downing of the jets, waving flags and chanting slogans of victory. In Cairo, state media praised Iran's strike as a message that injustice will not go unanswered. For many ordinary Arabs, the images of Israeli jets falling were not just military news, they were emotional vindication after years of suffering in Palestine. Meanwhile, in Tehran, the government declared the operation a new chapter. Iranian analysts on state television argued that the strike had proven two things: that Israel was vulnerable and that Iran could protect Gaza. While Western experts caution against overestimating Iran's capabilities, the psychological shift is undeniable. Even in America, questions are being asked. Defense experts note that if Israel's sophisticated U.S.-made defense systems could be breached, what about American forces stationed abroad? Could hypersonic missiles one day challenge U.S. dominance? Suddenly, a regional war in the Middle East feels like a preview of a new global arms race. The political consequences in Washington are equally serious. Members of Congress are already split. Some push for even more weapons shipments to Israel, arguing that abandoning an ally would embolden Iran. Others, particularly younger lawmakers, point to the humanitarian toll in Gaza and the collapse of Israeli deterrence as reasons to reconsider. For ordinary Americans over 50, the core of our audience this moment raises uncomfortable memories. The Cold War taught them about deterrence through strength. Vietnam taught them about the limits of military might. The Gulf War showed how quickly air dominance could win a conflict. But today the lessons seem mixed. If 30 jets can fall in minutes, then even the strongest powers must rethink their assumptions. One American pastor speaking at a church service in Texas put it this way: "We pray for peace, we pray for justice, and we pray for wisdom. But we must also pray for truth, that our leaders tell us what really happens, not just what they want us to believe." His words reflect a growing sentiment that faith and family must guide responses, not political slogans. The global consequences are immense. Will Israel's humiliation invite restraint, or will it trigger an even broader conflict involving the United States and Iran? Will Europe take real action or only issue statements? Will the Arab world push for peace or prepare for escalation? What about you? Do you think America should continue supporting Israel at any cost? Or is it time to step back and rethink our role? Share your perspective in the comments. I'm listening, and I want to know what you think. The story of these past days is one of tragedy, shock, and change. In Gaza, families grieve in silence, entire neighborhoods gone in a single night. Israel, once certain of its strength in the skies, has suffered the unthinkable: 30 fighter jets destroyed, in minutes 80 more erased before they ever left the ground. Iran, long underestimated, now steps forward with newfound confidence, claiming the role of defender for the Palestinian cause. And the world, from Washington to Brussels to Cairo, struggles to make sense of what comes next. For Americans, especially those who remember the Cold War and Vietnam, the lessons feel familiar. Overwhelming force does not always bring security. Technology does not guarantee safety. And no nation, however powerful, is beyond the reach of history's turning tides. The loss of 30 jets was not just a military defeat, it was a symbol. A symbol that even the strongest powers can stumble. A symbol that deterrence built on intimidation alone may not last. And a warning that the future of the Middle East may look very different from its past. But beyond geopolitics, we must remember the human face of this conflict. A father in Gaza pulling his daughter from the rubble. A widow in Israel waiting for news of a pilot who will never come home. A young man in Tehran calling his mother to say that for once the world has seen Israel vulnerable. These are the lives that carry the weight of decisions made far above them. So where do we go from here? Will Israel reflect on its failures or strike back with even greater force? Will Iran press its advantage or pause, satisfied that it has proven its point? And what will America do? Double down on old alliances or listen to the voices of its own people who are growing weary of endless wars? History gives us clues but not answers. After Pearl Harbor, America chose war. After Vietnam, it chose withdrawal. After the Cold War, it chose leadership. Today, America faces another choice: how to respond when an ally is humbled, when new weapons shift the balance, and when ordinary people pay the highest price. For those of us watching from afar, perhaps the best we can do is to hold fast to the values that matter most: justice, family, freedom, and faith. Values that outlast the rise and fall of nations. Values that comfort the grieving and guide the living. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this moment marks the end of Israel's air supremacy? Or is it only one chapter in a much longer story? And more importantly, what do you pray for most in times like these: peace, justice, or strength? Leave your answer in the comments below. Because whether in Gaza, in Israel, or here in America, the longing is the same: safety for our families, peace for our children, and faith that justice will prevail.